of business of Parliament, then the whole democratic constitutional structure would have no meaning. And therefore, on this first component, I invite you to agree with me that the conduct of the two cabinet secretaries requires a censure. And I think we should not be in the business of trying to determine whether it was an invitation or a summon, because the Constitution, the law itself says you can invite or summon. The Senate has been so kind, our committees have been so kind. They invite, they give you a certain number of days to appear, and then subsequently summon. The choice, the discretion is not to the cabinet secretary. The discretion is of the Senate or the committee to decide how you are going to be made to appear through an invitation or through a summon. That word invitation should not be read in its popular parlance that is like you're being invited for a tea party. You're being invited to an important business of state which you must perform. So on this first limb of the motion, is actually the second limb of the motion, I invite all of us to censure these two ministers. And of course, the consequences of it, then the relevant committee, since it was under the direction of the relevant committee which was dealing with the matter, sanctions should be taken against the two cabinet secretaries. It should not just be this resolution by the Senate in plenary. I think there must be some sanctions, and the punishment is set out, as I've read, in the Powers and Privileges Act. And Mr. Speaker, you know, the problem with this particular matter is that the invitation was not just by the chair. It was through the order of the Speaker. You are one of the state officials, very few, that when you are presiding over our deliberations, you wear a special dress of honor. And in the order of things, looking at the order of, in terms of protocol and seniority, Mr. Speaker, you are so high up. You're so high up that when you speak, you know, heaven and earth should move. And it is, the Speaker is very high up in the order of things, both as a member of this House and the Speaker of Parliament. Now, on the second one, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to say much about this because already the out there is crying. And many members have expressed themselves, even yesterday, during the debate on the cost of fuel and electricity. Every one of us have talked about the fact that these prices or escalation of prices and costs of fuel and electricity is unbearable. And Mr. Speaker, I've tried to look for all sorts of literature available from official sources, from publications from all over the world, up to this morning. And it demonstrates that the cost of fuel in Kenya in relation to other countries is extremely high, Indeed, by the communication made by EPRA itself, it categorized our fuel costs as one of the highest in the continent. And I cannot believe why cost of fuel in Kenya should be higher than Uganda. There must be some explanation for that. And Mr. Speaker, in fact, on this matter, all these publications agree, and leaving out the oil-producing countries, which are quite a number in Africa, including whose costs are lower in comparison to Kenya. But I would not understand Why a country like Swaziland, the cost of oil in Swaziland are better than those in Kenya? Why the cost of oil in Namibia, Mozambique, the DRC, a country which has experienced a lot of problems? I know it has got a small enclave where there's oil, Kapinda, but that enclave is perpetually in a state of insurrection. Tanzania, Zambia, Rwanda, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, maybe it has oil, I don't know. Malawi, Uganda, Cameroon. In fact, in that list, in more than about 50 African countries, we stand at about number 30 in terms of cost of oil. That requires some kind of explanation. And I am glad that the Secretary of the Cabinet Secretary in charge of petroleum, in one of his interactions with the Parliament, I think on the 14th day, Monday the 14th, 2021, Secretary Munyas is quoted as urging Parliament to review taxation on petroleum as the best option of cautioning consumers from rising energy costs. So it didn't talk about the pandemic. It didn't talk about anything else. It says it is Parliament who has got that responsibility. Now, Parliament does what it is always required to do under the law. It gives the minister or the regulatory authority some discretion, but that discretion must be applied in a manner that does not cause, unhappiness or cause unnecessary burdens on the people. Why would EPRA, in the current circumstances, decide to increase the prices of oil? It is not because of legislation, because that power that they were given as a regulatory authority must be administered in a way that is conscious or takes into consideration the condition of the ordinary Kenyans. I must say that for that this time around, I must agree with the National Assembly. Arising out of the proceeding yesterday, they are required, at least by the direction of the Speaker, that they come with a report within 30 days, the Committee on Finance, with a draft legislation on how to deal with this rising fuel costs. And I remember the last time when there was a question of debt and the question of the levy, petroleum levy and VAT. We did make noise as a house, but we didn't have those tools with which to make an intervention. And Mr. Speaker, probably I may conclude by saying this. In the United States, the powers of the Senate came over time. The kind of sibling rivalry between the two houses was there in the United States as it is here now. And most of the powers, including budget making, were with the House of Representatives. But over time, they have realized that if you include Senate in some of these issues, including even the process of budget making, then you are better off than dealing with it as one chamber. For example, if taxes are increased, it affects counties, without a doubt. And I do not see any reason why Senate should not be involved. If taxes are reduced, similarly, counties will be affected. And when it comes to national revenue, where we have an entry point of determination of the share, horizontally between the national and county governments, that we have some role to play. But I think the most important duty of any parliament is the issues of taxation. And I think this should be a shared responsibility in time. And we'll never stop making that case as observed by the Supreme Court. And Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying sometimes building a big house, you can build a big house, but if you have nothing inside it, that house to eat, you're still will not resolve the problem. In Kenya, I think it is good that we are working hard on our infrastructure. It's good for the economy, it's good for the people. But if the people's pockets are empty, or if the standard of living is too high for the people, or the cost of living is too high, then some of these major capital expenditures we are making may not benefit the people at the end. So for the future, our government should be very clear on the issues of debt and on the issues of taxation. As I said yesterday, the American Revolution was, was based on the question of taxation. Somebody said taxation without representation is like tyranny. But I say that over-taxation, like I said yesterday, is slavery. If all you're working for in your life is consumed by tax, then your spirit for hard work will be eliminated. So the authorities must always be thinking that as you want to do certain things which may be good for public good, you must always be conscious of the fact that people need to eat, people need to have shelter, and people need to have good hospitals and medicine, and people need clothing. For example, Mr. Speaker, there are people in this town, and Senator Sakaja is better placed to talk about this, but there are a lot of people in this town who earn 10,000 shillings a month. Now, if you're earning 10,000 shillings a month, and the cost of boarding a matatu goes up by even 3 shillings out of that 10,000 shillings. We can be talking about this republic, what good things we're doing, but for that man who has to pay an extra 3 shillings out of 10,000 shillings for transport, return, and even if it is 50 shillings or 100 shillings, 3 shillings on top means a lot. And fuel, so long as you increase fuel, you're increasing the cost of food stuff, of medicine, of transport, and even of housing. It is a commodity, it's a primary commodity. It's not a commodity that one can say it affects only one sector. Even in terms of production, fuel and cost of fuel and electricity are primary. They are primary towards production. And if you want people to generate more wealth, you have to be very careful how you increase cost of fuel and so on. And I hope that at the end of this, by resolution, we censure, and secondly, we urge the National Assembly to speed up the legislation, the contemplated legislation to deal with this matter. And Senate probably can make a representation by way of a message that legislation is required like yesterday. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I move and ask Senator Wetangula to second. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I was wondering where Senator Cheriot was when the motion started. There was once a committee to investigate land clashes, and when it came to voting, half of the members of the committee disappeared. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second. And Mr. Speaker, as I second, I want to urge this House, and I can see in front of me great men and women, behind me great men and women, that this is a patriotic duty. It has nothing to do with your brother. It has nothing to do with your party. It has everything to do with the people of Kenya and what we are going through. Yesterday, in a committee of the whole, as you are directed, chaired by out on these issues. And Mr. Speaker, members of committees in this House know that when a minister is unable to come to a committee on invitation or summons, the very least they do is normally send their PS or any other senior officer to come and tender an apology and explanation to the committee. We all understand that sometimes you may not be available for this or that reason. But Mr. Speaker, in yesterday's meeting, and my good friend the chair is here, there was not a single representation from any of these two ministries. Not even a press officer from the minister's office to just come and tell us that we are sorry, we are not available today. Nothing. And I did say, Mr. Speaker, in a crisis moment as this, the Minister for Petroleum, wherever he was, would have cut short his speech, his trip, and come back to the country to address this issue. Nothing has happened, Mr. Speaker. And as we speak here, I join Senator Orengo in also opining that I don't think we have received any explanation, even from the proceedings of yesterday that were aired live, from any of these ministries about what happened. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Minister for Energy saying that what he was invited for does not concern him. Mr. Speaker, that is an assault on the dignity and authority of the chair of this House. On the day when we canvass this matter, Mr. Speaker, and Hansard is here to bear you out as our Speaker, the distinguished senator from Kisumu, Rose Nyamunga, stood up and said, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Yesterday, I was shocked when I got a bill of 53,000 in electricity consumption, yet I've been paying around 18,000 or 19,000. Anytime you complain, they come to read your meter, then they tell you that is what they found on the meter. What is going on in this country? It should not continue like this. Something should be done. There's a big problem in that ministry. We know what the problem is, but we are not solving it." Then she went on, Mr. Speaker. Then at the end of the conversation and submissions on the floor, I requested you, Mr. Speaker, that following what Senator Nyamunga had said, and the country is bleeding and hurting because of high electricity bills and now fuel, kindly order the invitation of the two twin ministers to come before the House. And you did order. And Mr. Speaker, to vindicate the office of the clerk, we were told that the letters of invitation carried the Hansard of the day, so that each minister would know what they were coming to be questioned about. So Minister Keter cannot and should not and cannot be allowed to say that what was on the floor of the House and before the committee does not concern him, because it squarely concerns him. In any case, Mr. Speaker, the article in the Constitution that Senator Orengo has quoted repeatedly, Article 153, when the House and its committees summon a minister, it doesn't matter on what matter. It doesn't. All the House needs to do is invite or summon a minister, and they're duty bound to even miss cabinet and come to the House of Parliament to answer to the representatives of the people of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, every minister, when they take oath of office, they say, and I quote in Kiswahili, nitahifadhi, nitailinda, na nitaitetea katiba ya nchi yetu ya Kenya. By doing so, you are adhering studiously to every single provision in the Constitution, including but not limited to being required to go to Parliament to answer questions, because that is what government must do. That is what the responsibility of government is. But to date, Mr. Speaker, we have no answers. We have no responses. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, this House must stand up in unison. Our censure may not lead to these ministers leaving office, but it's a blot on their character. It's a blot on their career. That indeed, they were given responsibility and it becomes a matter of future reference on them that they snapped Parliament, they abdicated responsibility, they were unresponsive to the plight of Kenyans, and they were uncaring in the discharge of our duties and responsibilities. That is what it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in comparable jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, in Northern Ireland, the Attorney General of Northern Ireland, who was then a counterpart of Amos Wako, the police were looking for a suspect of IRA, and they found him hiding in the servants' quarters of the Attorney General. It was proven that the Attorney General didn't even know that that fellow was in his quarters. He promptly resigned and went home, Mr. Speaker. In Tanzania, during the time of President Magufuli, a friend of mine who was a minister failed to go to Parliament to answer questions. Magufuli promptly dismissed him. And he left cabinet. Mr. Speaker, this has happened in many places. There was a minister in the UK, Mr. Speaker, and it has been doing rounds even on social media, who arrived late in Parliament to answer a question, and the Speaker censured him. He promptly resigned and left cabinet. He didn't fail to arrive, he arrived late. These ones don't even arrive, don't even explain, don't say anything. They are now, Mr. Speaker, behaving and talking the language of Simon at Garfunkel and Paul Simon of the sound of silence. And we want to tell them that the sound of silence is louder than spoken words. We need, Mr. Speaker, the president to tell his ministers that they have a duty to him as they have a duty to Parliament, because it's the House of Representatives. Anything that is touching and affecting the people, Mr. Speaker, must be dealt with in this House. Over the weekend, Madam Speaker, I was in Busia County, represented by distinguished Amos Wako. Mr. Speaker, there was a queue of vehicles of Kenyans crossing to Uganda to buy fuel. Fuel to Uganda, to Rwanda, to Burundi, to Eastern Congo is imported through Mombasa, passes through Kenya. How come fuel in Goma, Boni, and Butembo in Congo is cheaper than fuel in Kenya? Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make an economic sense. And Mr. Speaker, now it's time that this House must look at a bill that was drafted by a leadership of Senator Murkomen that was brought to this House to amend the Constitution, to give authority to this House, Mr. Speaker, as a house of reference on all bills coming from the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the Supreme Court in the advisory told the country and this House that the judges did not envisage any situation under the sun where any legislation did not concern counties. That whether you are talking of police, the theater of security is in the county. Whether you are talking of taxation, the affected people are in the counties. We must, Mr. Speaker, as we move to the future, demystify the definition of the so-called money bills in Article 114. So that especially taxation, Mr. Speaker, when you go to the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, and members themselves tell us that when a bill comes to the House, they're allowed to speak for a maximum of 2 minutes each. What can you speak on taxation, Madam Speaker, for 2 minutes? And you turn progressively a House of Parliament into a voting machine. In fact, it becomes now an extension of the executive. People sit in the treasury. They don't interact with ordinary people. They don't know how ordinary people are hurting. They simply think that tax the Kenyan as much as you can to solve your problems. Madam Speaker, I don't believe the explanation being channeled out, and I listened to proceedings in the National Assembly. And unfortunately, many members of the National Assembly were behaving like apologists of the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, I had one member saying that this extremely high punitive and oppressive taxation is because of our debts. Mr. Speaker, Mutula Kilozo and I sit in the committee, Madam Speaker, of Finance. We were chaired by the senior senator from Mandera. The Minister of Finance appeared before us and said he is raising the debt ceiling so that he can opt to take concessional borrowing and retire expensive debts.
That's fine. Honorable members, I propose a question that clause 4 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I now put the question that clause 4 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 4 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 5. I propose a question that clause 5 be part of the bill, no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that clause 5 be part of the bill. Will as many as our that opinion say aye? All the members? Yes. You have to vote. I'll put that again. I now put the question that clause 5 be part of the bill. Will as many as our that opinion say aye? Will as many as our the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 6. I propose a question that clause 6 be part of the bill. We have an amendment by the Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Sophia.
And Chair, this amendment is in the order paper, and it means that we propose to reduce the quorum of the conducting business for the board members.